Have you heard of this trend in the rental market called warehousing? So if you're in New York City, you might know about it. Rent-stabilized apartments make up about half of all the rental housing in New York City. And they're some of the most affordable places to live in the city. But unfortunately, tens of thousands of these apartments are being kept off the market by landlords who are doing this thing called warehousing, basically. Now, the number of rent-stabilized homes that get reported vacant on annual apartment registrations went up to like 61,000 back in 2021. It was less than 34,000 a year before that. Why is it happening? It's a big problem because it means that people who are in dire need of affordable housing are being kept from it. Now, some state landlords are making up housing scarcity to manipulate legislative changes in Albany. But on top of this, New York doesn't build many new homes. So even market rate homes are hard for everybody to find. Everybody in New York City pays high rents because a lot of people want to move here, and the city's surrounded by low density suburbs that aren't growing at all. So everybody here competes to live in a small area close to really good jobs. You can expand the subway, you could upzone the suburbs, or you can build taller in the city. But we're not doing any of that. So rents rise. Now, there might be an 8% drop in some of the housing units from if you look from 2019 to 2021, those numbers fell. The number of apartments registered as rent stabilized fell. That's a loss of like 95,000 apartments for rent after 2019. And that came a year after the overhaul of some of Albany's rent stabilization laws. Now, these rent laws block landlords from raising rents on vacant units when renting them out to new tenants. What's the harm in that? Why are landlords doing this? Well, the landlords say that the current price restrictions on stabilized housing is going to rob them of the capital that they need to make necessary repairs in old housing stock. Making these repairs can be really hard, since construction in one apartment is going to bother residents next door. They're going to complain. Landlords also have to worry about an eviction moratorium. Lease breaking and widespread non-payment of rent is adding to their financial problems. And they got to keep an eye on the federal lawsuit that got filed by two major industry groups that challenge the entire rent regulation system as being unconstitutional. Now, that case is before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, and that could reward landlords who've kept apartments vacant if the highest court undermines rent stabilization. But for legal success for these landlords, it's going to be a long shot, but some property owners are obviously going to wait this out. Now, one thing that's elevated rents on vacant apartments could be this 421A program, and that's a recently expired tax abatement. It's been criticized by policy experts as a big waste of public money, but this program provided tax incentives for developers of new housing, and it required some or all the units to be rent stabilized, some renting for thousands of dollars a month. The rent laws normally only apply to apartments built before 1975. So, look, 421A did add more affordable housing to the market. And without it, you're not adding more of these rent stabilized units to the apartment. You're only looking at the existing supply, and that's slowly dropping. Now, if you have old apartments built before 1974, the condition of these older apartments is pretty bad. Now, you could say 20,000 apartments need super expensive overhauls, and the currently permitted rent levels can't recover those costs. If you want to renovate these units, the landlords are basically saying it's going to cost more than the amount that renting them would ever pull in. And you got to do something about these costs. You got to do something about this issue soon. You've got this Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, and that kind of repealed both vacancy bonuses and vacancy decontrol. That just ended up sharply limiting how much landlords could pass along the cost of renovations to tenants through rent increases. This is stuff that housing advocates and lawmakers criticized for spiking rents and fueling displacement. So that's been removed. Now, landlords are still legally permitted to keep their rent-stabilized apartments empty indefinitely. It's not acceptable